Hello, I'm Erica Nisborski, your host for Behind the Lens. On our program, we talk with noted photographers about their work. And today, my guest is James Calder. Welcome to Behind the Lens.
Thanks, Erica.
James Calder was born in London and moved to the United States in 1987. He is predominantly a self-taught photographer, having saved up to buy his first SLR at the age of 13. His work can broadly be defined as journalistic, but often includes photographs that would be considered artistic, editorial, or commercial. His work is held in several dozen private collections, and 4 of his photos were bought by the DC government and hang in DC's City Hall. His work has appeared in 15 local art exhibits, and his journalistic images have been used by media outlets that include the Washington Post, CNN, and Fox Channel 5. James is currently a photo editor and pool photographer for DCist.com, the local news and entertainment blog. And he is one of the organizers of the annual photography exhibit DCist Exposed. In addition to his work for DCist.com, James is an official photographer for the DC Rollergirls. Why do you take photographs?
Well, partly because I think I'm a natural introvert, and I like to, instead of engage people in conversation, I'd rather observe and capture the surroundings that I see before me.
And whose work influences you?
There's a few. There's from the older days, we have Diane Arbus and Henri Cartier-Bresson as far as journalistic style photography.
Mm-hmm.
William Eggleston is another one whose color work obviously was influential in photography in general, but I just find it very basically sort of instinctively refreshing. It's just one of those styles that I can't get enough of. Every image just makes me excited.
And what do you think sets your work apart from other photographers?
Well, I think I have a broad diversity of viewpoints. I don't think I'm narrow in my focus, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm adaptable, sort of a jack of all trades, but I don't want to do myself too much of a disservice. I feel like I'm pretty good at doing a variety of different types of photography, whether it's journalistic or creative. I feel like I'm a good all-rounder.
Mm-hmm. I know you brought some of your work with you today. Let's jump in and take a look at some of your photographs. So we have here in the first photo, it's a portrait of 2 men. Where was this taken?
This was at a place called Scotty's Place, which is in West Virginia. It's a day camp and residential camp for homeless children. I think it pulls kids from 5 states and DC. And I found out about it through my wife, who ended up being a camp counselor there for a couple of weeks. So I went out to shoot some photos for that organization, which is a nonprofit, obviously. And it was just fascinating to see the relationship that built up between the camp counselors, like Abraham, who you see on the left of this
Mm-hmm.
shot, and one of these kids, Marvin. Just some incredible bonding and sort of opening up of minds and spirits.
And so this is a moment from the day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I specifically asked people if I could take their pictures one evening as the sun was setting. It was the perfect light, and people were very happy to have their pictures taken. And obviously, you can see the intensity of the sort of the looks on these guys' faces. They're actually pretty happy. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
look like they're happy necessarily, but I think they're confident and comfortable and in who they are.
Mm-hmm. And we move on. We have here some fans, Lady Gaga fans, outside the Verizon Center waiting to get in.
Yeah,
what drew you towards this image, other than the obvious? They have soda cans wrapped in their hair.
That is one of the appealing aspects of the subject. It just seemed like a great photo opportunity to head down to the Verizon Center. Lady Gaga actually didn't allow much media into her concerts, so for DCist, I headed down there and didn't need to get inside because it was pretty much as much fun taking
Mm-hmm.
shots of the folks waiting to get in, and there were a lot of people with a lot of interesting costumes and makeup and hair accessories, and almost all of them were very happy to have their picture taken.
And we have the Scare Force One mascot, one of the teams on the DC Rollergirl League. what was happening here?
I was actually doing a series of portraits for the DC Rollergirls, and I think this is the only shot among the ones I've brought today that uses artificial light. I actually didn't have that much experience with artificial light, and this actually gave me an opportunity to learn a bit and get my hands dirty with artificial light.
And how do you feel about artificial light, using it as compared, to using natural light?
Yeah, I did take a studio lighting class when I was taking classes back in the early 1990s at Montgomery College, when I took a couple of classes, but it never appealed to me. I prefer the instant moment sort of situation. I don't like to have to set things up. Almost all my pictures that you see here are candid to a certain degree. Obviously, some of the portraits are posed.
Everything feels very real.
Sure, yeah. I don't like to spend a lot of time setting people up because people start to lose their comfort level. So, obviously with a more formal studio portrait setup, the expectation is there of the subject that they need to be ready to wait around and have the lighting set up. So, in context, I'm fine with artificial light. I just have a natural tendency to go with available light.
And then we have another DC Roller Girl photo, the penalty box. What's happening with this image?
So in roller derby, like in, I guess, ice hockey and some other sports, if you break a rule or two, you get thrown in the penalty box. And this was, I think, the first season of the DC Rollergirls in 2006 or 7, I forget. And this was a skater called Meatball, and just to make it more fun for the audience, they had the penalized skaters hold a little sign, in this case, bad. I think there was another one. And then there's a referee behind who's sort of counting down the seconds until she's allowed to leave the penalty box and join the action again. But this picture was in an exhibit that was part of Photo Week, actually, a couple of years ago, and a large version of this hangs at a sports bar on U Street.
That's awesome.
It's a very popular shot.
So you are the official DC Rollergirls photographer.
Yep.
And you're there every bout with your camera.
Yeah, unless there's some sort of earthquake or hurricane.
Yeah.
I'm there every time.
And for our viewers, if they want to find out more about the DC Rollergirls, they can go to dcrollergirls.com and find a full list of their schedule where they can come bring their camera and check out more of the game. You also shoot soccer. Here you have this photo of the DC United game. What camera were you using here and what lens?
This was the Canon 1D3, which is sort of a sports photographer's camera. It shoots 10 frames a second, and obviously for action, any kind of action, that's very important.
It's crucial.
Yeah, and I was, although I was fairly close to this. It was at my end of the field, but it was a 300mm lens, and because of the crop factor on the 1D3, it's sort of equivalent to a 400 on a full frame. So it lets you get nice and tight. F2.8 if you need the light, which I think I did. And most of these games are night games, so it's not 100% well lit. But of course, the narrow aperture gets you a nice separation of the subject from the background.
Yeah,
blurring out the
and
background.
having that low aperture, it also allows, it looks like this is a game in the middle of the day. And you're able to capture moments like this that with other equipment wouldn't be possible.
Right, makes a huge amount of difference. And again, the high ISO settings on newer, higher end cameras make it very easy to do those kind of things in low light.
And concert photography is really hard. A lot because of the low light. A lot of people would consider it a challenge. What were you doing here to capture this?
Well, one thing about concert photography is metering. You can't usually use evaluative metering. You have to kind of mess with it and do manual, because you're almost never going to get the right settings. Spot metering, depending on the actual camera, might work, but you've really got to tweak it manually and find the right balance, because the lighting tends not to change during a concert. So once you find those settings, you stick to them. And this is a pretty bright lens too. I think this was my 50 f1.4, probably right around 1.4, 1.6, maybe 1.8. And and very, very high ISO, probably 16 or 3200.
And what camera are you shooting with?
It's the 5D, the original 5D.
So you can bump that ISO up with that.
Yep.
And you've moved into a full frame camera here, so you are getting that 50 millimeter look, that iconic look that so many photographers try to capture.
Yeah, no, it's great for concert photography.
Mm-hmm. And we have the famous Ben's Chili Bowl on U Street.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come about this image?
I was walking back from the 9:30 Club actually, and it was night and it was freezing cold, and there's a lot of people in there on a Friday or Saturday night, especially when it's cold, because you don't want to be standing outside. And it kind of was frosted up a little bit. You can see there's some little bit of condensation on the inside, and it just had this glow to it, and I thought, well, maybe I'll risk losing my fingers here and actually take a couple of shots. It was so cold, but I managed to reel off maybe 2 shots.
And your camera, was this the 5D again?
This was the 5D.
So you're able to shoot with that camera when it's extremely cold out, because it has, it's heavy duty.
Yep.
And so the people crammed into Ben's Chili Bowl, kind of drew you into this image with the light, and it's dark and it's cold, and they're inside there. Yeah,
and as you said, it's sort of an iconic place in DC.
Yeah.
This is before Obama, so it wasn't as popular as it is now.
And keeping with the cold theme, we have the Cristo Gates in Central Park, which was a few years ago now. You were up there, and a lot of photographers traveled there. How did you pick this scene?
Well, I was very fortunate that we happened to pick the weekend. I was only there for 2 days. That they had 6 inches of snow, which obviously was a fantastic photo opportunity to have that contrast of this perfect blanket. And again, before people trampled it and spoiled it, we were there while it was falling, and to have that amazing contrast of the bright orange of the gates with the white of the snow, and of course the Manhattan skyline. It's sort of almost a too good to be true combination of things.
And what were you shooting with here?
This, I would imagine, back in '06, this could have been my Rebel XS, my first digital camera, or it was my 20D, which was my second. I've gone through a few Canon bodies since going digital.
And that's also important to note, in order to achieve an image like this before the snow has been damaged, you have to sacrifice and put yourself in a situation sometimes when you don't necessarily want to. Like you may have to get up early to get that shot before the snow's been trampled on, or get to a place you can get the front row seat. That's photography's all about moments and being able to achieve them.
And I believe I waited around in the cold for quite some time to get the shot.
We have this fantastic series of images of yours with the orange light in London. What was going on here?
That is a question that I'm asked a lot. Some people seem to think it's a post-apocalyptic scene, which you could easily interpret it as that, but really this is not staged, which a lot of people also suggest it might be. This is at the Tate Modern Gallery in London. It's an installation piece. I believe it was called Summer, but it was installed in winter. So what you have is a bunch of patrons of this art gallery in this huge installation space coming in from the cold and being taken into this very still chilly environment, but in a setting that appears warm. Basically, the artist who installed this had set up a huge fake sun on the ceiling. The ceiling was mirrored, and that's what you'll see in the fourth of the series. You'll see the view looking up at the ceiling, reflecting the view of the floor of everyone taking pictures laying on the floor.
You're really placing yourself in order to achieve this image. You're laying down on the ground and looking up. You're